I love difficult video games. Overcoming a good challenge in a game is so rewarding and satisfying that, if done right, the difficulty itself can be one of the most memorable aspects of the gaming experience. But not all challenges are created equal, and many have argued against hard games like Dark Souls and Cuphead, which lack an easy mode of any kind, alienating players who are unable to overcome the high skill floor required to progress through these tough games. While I've also seen countless gaming elitists scoff at players who elect to play on easy mode in games that feature it. So the question is, does difficulty matter? Well, I'll answer that one for you right now. Yes, it does. It sets the tone of the game that you're playing. Does this game want me to be relaxed or tense? I couldn't tell until I encountered this thing. And if you're physically unable to overcome a challenge, you will either have to lower the difficulty, or you will simply not be able to progress. Or for something like an RPG, you can level grind or change your build, which also serves to make said encounter easier. But here's the question within the question. Why does difficulty matter, and how much does it really? And should some players really be locked out of certain gaming experiences if they're not, quote unquote, good? Well, today we're going to find out. So, this is why. So, for this discussion, there are two types of games that we'll be looking at. The ones with a single preset difficulty, where all players will experience the same level of challenge, which has likely been very carefully crafted by the developer. Or, more commonly, there are games that feature multiple options, often at least an easy, medium, and hard mode. Typically, these various difficulties simply adjust how much health enemies have and how much damage they do, with a few notable exceptions. But when a developer carefully crafts the experience to a single difficulty, they have the unique opportunity to really make sure that their game is balanced and fair, since they need only focus on the one mode. And often with these games, the difficulty is the whole point. The Dark Souls series, and frankly, any and all From Software titles, incorporate the crushing difficulty into the world building. Like, the whole point of these games is that you're not supposed to feel strong, or overpowered in any way. Just take a look at the nightmare world of Yharnam from Bloodborne, another From Software title that is one of my personal favorites. No part of this world is supposed to feel easy to overcome. Frankly, living in this world is supposed to feel bad. It's a place full of horrible nightmare creatures beyond human comprehension, and your character, no matter how much you level grind, is still just a lowly hunter that must fight and earn the right to survive. The abject fear that you feel when walking into a boss room for the first time, as the cutscene kicks in and the music begins to swell, is all emphasized by the fact that you, as a player, are fully aware that you are in danger, especially if it's been a while since you've rested. Because just like in any Souls-like, if you die during this encounter, you're going to drop all of your currency right where you perished, whether it be blood echoes, souls, ergo, etc., etc. It all serves the same function. And if you die again at any point before recovering these souls, they will be lost forever, making each individual death so much more impactful. So the juxtaposition of living in a world that constantly wants to and will kill you, pitted with the fact that dying is extra inconvenient here, since we may permanently lose all of our currency required for leveling up, all makes for a really stressful experience when you step into said boss arena. I mean, come on, you're living in the same world as the Orphan of Kos. Like, what the fuck? Imagine how much of the atmosphere would be lost if you were able to breeze through any of these encounters. The fear factor of these monsters isn't simply in their visual design, it's in the threat of them killing you, which they definitely will, especially in your first playthrough. I don't know about you guys, but I'm definitely most scared when I know I'm going to die, just like in real life. Or how about a very different yet similar type of game? Cuphead, which also only has one difficulty, which is intentionally very challenging, which is meant to contrast the otherwise very silly and cartoony art style. At the time of this game releasing, I remember so many people getting very angry that they couldn't play it, because they loved the art style and wanted to experience it for themselves, but felt alienated by the fact that they weren't pro gamers with endless hours to fight these bosses over and over in order to maybe eventually defeat them. And I will somewhat agree that it is certainly convenient to have an easy mode for players who want their games to be a more leisurely experience. Maybe they're newer to video games and simply haven't developed many pro gamer skills yet. Or perhaps they just want to experience the story without the threat of being bodied by the Orphan of Kos. And really, as a player, you're entitled to experience the game however you like. The first time I play through a new Kingdom Hearts game, I often play on standard just because I want to relax and enjoy the story. Then I go back on repeat playthroughs and take on the hardest difficulties such as critical mode. Or, if I'm feeling really masochistic, level 1 critical, which is exactly what it sounds like. You play through this entire RPG without leveling up a single time. And these modes are a whole different kind of fun for me because they really require you to utilize all the tools available to you as a player. Seriously, I never need to use summons in the KH games unless I'm playing on critical or especially level 1. And then they suddenly become my greatest tool for survival. But while it is our right as players to experience a game however is most enjoyable for us, and nobody should ever try to take that away from you, it is also the right of the developer to take whatever creative liberties they'd like with their video game. And that includes the difficulty. Kind of the whole experience of Cuphead is the difficulty. Almost the entire game is just boss fights, which are often intended to be the most challenging segments of most games in general. And outside of a few different selectable weapons and perks, there is nothing you can do to make these bosses actually easier. No leveling up, no easy mode. Playing with a friend won't even help you because while your damage output is doubled, so is the health of the boss. You simply have to be good. And that's the point. It's supposed to be ironic that a lot of these goofy looking animated characters pack such a deadly punch. And that's simply the type of world that these devs set out to create. But what's great is they're always going to pack the same punch for all players. When I talk to my friends about Grim Matchstick, I know the lack of difficulty settings means that they faced the same exact boss that I did. So, when someone proclaims that they finally beat him, I am the first to congratulate them because I know exactly what that boss feels like to beat. It ain't easy, and honestly, this just makes gaming discussions very interesting for me personally. I can imagine this somewhat harkens back to the days of classic NES or arcade games, which didn't come with difficulty settings. Kids on the playground gathering around to discuss how far they got in Super Mario Bros. Or their high scores in Pac-Man were all on the same playing field because the level of challenge was the same for everyone, making it extra impressive if someone achieved a goal that you personally haven't yet. Even though many older games would intentionally have straight up unfair sections with the intent of getting players stuck, forcing them to retry over and over, therefore padding the runtime since these games often weren't very long. So, though this isn't exactly what I would call good game design, there is still a shared experience that all players had. I remember when a friend of mine in high school got me to play Dark Souls 3, which was my first Souls-like. Each day for at least a week or two at school, we would regularly discuss what bosses we had faced, how many tries they took us, and what we did to beat them. I remember absolutely calling bullshit on the fact that he claimed to beat Pontiff Sullivan on his second try, while I had to walk him through step by step on how to beat the Abyss Watchers. And while it is definitely possible to lie about how many tries it took you to beat a boss, which, by the way, he definitely was, it still remains impossible to lower the difficulty. You, as a player, have to be able to beat the boss as he was intended by the developers. You have to grow and adapt, learn the movesets of your opponent, and determine when your best openings are, not only for attacking, but also for healing. And honestly, though I'm much better at the game than I was when I first played it, Pontiff Sullivan still kicks my ass to this day. Yet, though I only get slightly nervous each time I go in to face him, I always feel incredibly satisfied whenever I do get my shit together and beat him. And that's the other very important element. The actual sense of accomplishment that comes with progressing through hard games. It's incredibly satisfying to feel yourself grow as a player and learn how to overcome a section of a game that you were previously stuck on. See, I've been playing games as long as I can remember. I was playing Kingdom Hearts when I was like 4 years old. And when I say I was, I mean my mom was. That's right, I'd mostly just walk around and accomplish nothing until the first sight of anything challenging, where I'd then hand the controller off to my mom and she'd beat all the tough parts for me, even though she wasn't much of a gamer herself. Instead, she was just a really good mom. At this rate, it probably took us at least a year to get through the game. However, I had never considered the angle that, what if my mom couldn't beat a boss for me? And that's exactly what happened when we reached the late game boss Chernobog. No matter how hard she tried, she just couldn't do it. And that's when I, now all grown up at the ripe age of 5 years old, stepped up and decided that I was going to beat this one myself. I tried and tried, slowly learning to be more patient and to not fly directly into the active volcano flame pillar, and after probably a full week of trying to beat it myself, I finally got him. I set out to complete a goal, and no matter how many times I failed, I got back up and tried again because I knew I could do it. And I didn't understand the concept of level grinding, so there was no making this easier for myself. I just had to do it. And it was in this moment, and many others that followed, that actually taught me an incredibly valuable lesson about perseverance and learning from your past failures. And I'm not just talking about in gaming. I mean that any sort of bosses or difficult puzzles that challenge us, especially as children, are subtly conditioning us to push back against life's actual challenges and to persevere through the hardest of times. I learned as a kid that if I really set my mind to something, I could achieve it, even if it takes a lot of effort and willingness to grow and adapt. Don't just give up. You may fail, but you need to get back up and get past this challenge so that you can see the end of the story. And it's not just internal growth and personal satisfaction that come with beating these difficult challenges, but often in-game rewards were locked behind the hardest parts. So this too taught me that the greatest rewards often come after the greatest of challenges. Basically, what I'm saying is, if I could beat KH1 Sephiroth at 5 or 6 years old, I figured I could accomplish anything in life. Oh, and speaking of things that terrify me, let's talk about horror games. I absolutely love the survival horror genre. It's probably the genre I have played the most. I'm talking about games like Dead Space 1 and 2, The Last of Us 1, Alan Wake 2, and most of the Resident Evil series. Some of my all-time favorites. And while these games almost always have multiple difficulty settings, they're often best experienced on their hardest difficulties, which actually enhance their immersiveness and scariness. You see, while most games simply increase enemy health and damage on higher difficulties, survival horror games do this to a less obnoxious degree, and instead often limit the size of your inventory, and greatly decrease the number of resources you encounter while scavenging, forcing a whole new level of anxiety in these interactive horror films as ammo and health management becomes a much bigger consideration during moment-to-moment decision-making, because you often can't afford to waste any bullets or take many hits at all. And traversing a post-apocalyptic wasteland feels much more immersive when resources are incredibly rare, as they realistically would be in that type of world. And sure, many people just want to play that first Last of Us game on easy, strictly to experience one of the greatest gaming stories out there, regardless of their gaming prowess. Which is absolutely fine, that's your right. But if you're a bit of a curious gamer, might I suggest maybe playing on one difficulty level higher than you're used to? The stress of being lower on supplies absolutely helps to emphasize the awful state of these worlds, I assure you. Damn, The Last of Us is such a good story-based survival horror game. It's really weird that it never got a sequel. Oh, what's that you say? The Last of Us isn't a horror game? Well, how about you replay that segment where you fall into the basement of the hotel on permadeath mode and get back to me? Because that's frankly a terror I've not known since KH1 Chernobog. Or the Orphan of Cause. Ah yes, permadeath mode. The ultimate level of immersive difficulty, as it really puts you in the shoes of the character, fighting for your life as if it's your only one. Because it is. If you die while on permadeath mode in something like, let's say, the Dead Space remake, your save file will be permanently deleted. That's it. You're dead. Game over. Although, technically, your save file isn't actually deleted in this game. You're just no longer able to play on impossible mode. And instead, you can continue on hard, which might not sound like that big of a deal, but only by completing impossible mode do you get the best rewards, which include a new suit for Isaac to wear, and the hand cannon foam finger weapon, which you can use in subsequent playthroughs, which is an awesome, fun joke weapon that also kills any necromorph in a single hit. It's so much fun. Just like how I said before that the best unlockables are hidden behind the greatest challenges. So if you die in this mode, you will have to restart on Impossible in order to unlock these special items. Holy shit, this game mode completely recontextualized this game for me. There is nothing scarier in a video game than struggling so desperately to survive in this mode. And this is all on top of there already being hardly any resources to use to your advantage. It is so stressful, and you really have to think on your feet. And even though I had completed this game twice already, it remained tense with every single corner I turned. And when I died in this mode, I genuinely felt like I died in real life. I mean, I don't know what death feels like, but I can imagine it feels something like this. But what about when games get it wrong? Or what about when it's unclear what the best mode is to play on? I mean, I absolutely love the God of War games, but these ones come with multiple settings. And frankly, it's hard to know which one is the premier experience intended by the developers. Would that be the Give Me God of War setting? I mean, it's got the name of the game in the title, but I don't know. In this mode, you absolutely get bodied by enemies. Your attacks deal very little damage. It's much more difficult to afflict enemies with status effects, yet the status effects you take have much more severe effects. Maybe it's balance mode then. I mean, this way we get to feel powerful as the God of War, as we should, yet many of these encounters feel too easy this way. So I typically play on the second highest difficulty, but my point here is, honestly, as a player, I have no idea what these difficulties even mean, and which one is going to be the best for me personally, or the most well-balanced overall while still being immersive. In the God of War game, I want to feel a little overpowered, while also feeling the oppressive force of many of these monsters and gods, presenting a real threat and challenge like a Dark Souls boss would. But in Dark Souls, I know I'm always getting the best possible experience because I'm playing on the only difficulty which has been carefully balanced by the devs. But with many multi-difficulty games, it's sometimes trial and error for the player to determine which difficulty is right for them, because these descriptions don't always do a great job of letting me know what the difficulty will actually feel like. But please, for the love of God, stop making enemies bullet sponges with ridiculous amounts of health as a means of making the game more difficult. That's not more challenging, it's just more tedious. KH2 actually has one of the best ultra hard modes ever in its critical mode, which has you taking more damage, yes, while also shortening your max HP and MP, yet you actually deal more damage and have extra abilities at your disposal at the start of the game. This makes all of the encounters way more engaging because you're simultaneously being incentivized to play more aggressively since you deal out more damage, and also more defensively because you can often easily be killed within a few hits. This makes each and every time where you engage with any enemy a delicate yet well thought out risk-reward system, where you have to carefully think about when to engage and what offensive and defensive options you would like to use. It's amazing and incredibly well balanced for the most part. And just because something is hard doesn't mean it can't also be balanced. I mean, every FromSoft game can be finished without taking a single hit while also not having to break the game at all. You don't have to cheat to get through the game like this. And I use that as the main kind of judge for if a game is balanced. I mean, I want to be challenged, don't get me wrong, but it should still be fair. Nearly impossible encounters don't feel hard, they feel cheap. Mortal Kombat 2 had its AI enemies perfectly reacting to your button inputs the second you press them, knowing exactly what you were going to do before you even did it, in order to artificially increase the difficulty, forcing players to spend more money for more retries in the arcade. And unavoidable attacks and damage sponge enemies just feel bad to go up against, like the developers didn't really playtest their game. Yet, this guy here was able to beat all 4 Souls games plus Bloodborne in one sitting without taking a single hit. Now that's a guy that can handle any challenge life throws at him. He can literally do anything.
Soulspawn no hero! We did it!
And you honestly can too with enough perseverance. And if a game seems simply too hard for you, you may want to consider that that game may just not be for you if you don't have the desire to spend the time learning and adapting to enemy movesets. which is simply what many difficult action games are all about. There are plenty of games out there designed with the intent of being relaxing and fun that may be more your speed, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Ironically, I have the opposite problem, where titles like Animal Crossing and The Sims are a bit too slow for my liking, but that's the point of those games. They're supposed to be relaxing worlds to engage with. But I'm not going to demand that Nintendo should create an ultra-hard mode for Animal Crossing so that I can enjoy it personally. That game just wasn't made for me, even though I do really enjoy its art style and music. And that's okay. Just like how Cuphead isn't for everyone because of its difficulty, regardless of how much they may enjoy the visuals. And it's up to you as a player to seek out the games that fit your preferences. But if you're up for it, I encourage you to occasionally seek out new challenges that will help you to grow as a player, as well as personally. The difficulty itself has enhanced the experience of so many games for me, forcing me to engage with more of the game's mechanics, enhancing the world building, and instilling a sense of personal satisfaction. And it really all started with that KH1 Chernobog boss fight. That encounter left such an impact on me that I now have that character literally tattooed on my arm. But why do we, as players, often intentionally seek out incredibly difficult games and boss fights? Many action games even feature crazy post-game bosses that we still willingly seek out and choose to spend countless hours on even after the game is finished. Why do we put ourselves through this? The game is over. Go home. Well, the simple answer is that it's fun to put all of the skills you've learned throughout the game to the ultimate test. And the more complex answer is that we, as humans, are always seeking out new avenues for innovation and personal growth. And challenging games are a spark that lights the drive and perseverance within us to motivate us through the hardships of daily life. While easy and relaxing games are an incredibly effective way to relieve stress and escape from the hardships of life. Whereas something like Bloodborne, not so much. But both have their place and deserve the right to exist side by side within the gaming landscape. And it's up to the individual player to engage with whatever interests them personally. Video games are, in fact, a leisure hobby. So, play them in whatever way makes you the happiest. But don't you ever try to tell me it's untrue that... If you made it this far, thank you very much for watching my video. If you enjoyed this, please feel free to check out some of my other content. I've got a playlist of all the other video essays I've done, as well as one for all of my boss rankings, and one for any of the silly meme type videos if that's more your speed. As my channel continues to grow, I hope that you'll stick with me, as I plan on branching out and making more video essays, as well as some more fun stuff. I don't know, we'll see what comes to me. But regardless, I really appreciate any form of support that you can give me. Like, comment, you know the drill. Regardless, thank you very, very much for watching my video.